Whoa there! Before we begin, I am not a licensed psychologist. I do have a bachelor's of science in psychology, but that is it. Please, do not take what I say as gospel and seek professional help if you think you need it after this video. Let's begin. One more thing before we get into the video. I am currently on vacation and my audio setup is not great. Not that it was perfect before, but it might sound a little echoey. We're just gonna have to make do unless I pull a MatPat and shove myself into a closet. Anyway, let's get to the video. At the very beginning of Kingdom Hearts, Sora faces the Shadow Heartless for the first time, along with his own stronger shadow, Darkseid. In this first episode, we are going to take a deep dive into the psychology of Carl Ewing and his theory of personality, specifically the Shadow. Carl Ewing is a big deal in psychology. He was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychologist who founded analytical psychology in the early 1900s. What stood out most for Ewing was his opposite views on psychology in comparison to Sigmund Freud. In Freud's work, he focused on one's unconsciousness, sexuality, and aggression, whereas Ewing focused on unconsciousness, spirituality, and the quest for personal meaning. Ewing identified 4 archetypes from the collective unconscious. He believed these archetypes to be universal across cultural systems. I will have a link in the description on the sources that I used for this that you can read if you want to learn more. Ewing labeled the archetypes the self, the persona, the shadow, and the anima, or animus. The persona is also known as the mask and is the direct inspiration for another widely known video game franchise, Persona. The persona is the conformity archetype, that is, what we present to the world for our convenience and social acceptance and adaptation. One could argue our protagonist Sora has a bit of an always happy-go-lucky persona, even though at some brief times in the franchise, we see that facade break. The anima is the mirrored biological sex archetype, the unconscious feminine and masculine energy that flows through everyone. Because this was the early 1900s, it was much more black and white about men having inner feminine energy, whereas females having inner masculine energy, but this has gotten far more complex in today's age, and I'd rather not go any further on the subject. The self is the archetype that Ewing wants others to strive for. It is basically the same concept for Erikson's self-actualization, in which we provide our own sense of individuality, unity, and also not conforming to others while doing so. Before we can identify our own self-archetype, we must identify and accept our shadow archetype. The shadow is the part of ourselves we reject, disown, or may even not recognize. Our persona usually contrasts with our shadow. Similar to Freud's concept of the id, our shadow archetype is known for the animal side of our personality. Ewing believes our shadow is responsible for both our destructive and creative energies. It is not always negative, but provides a balance to our personality. A saying used when describing the shadow archetype is, where there is light, there is also shadow. We tend to project our own negative traits onto others, aka a shadow. Say you have a friend who is often very flaky and hard to get a hold of. You tend to complain about this person with other people, just for them to then say, well, you are normally bailing out last minute, and you take hours to respond to my text too. Your friend that you were talking about may be flaky and unresponsive at times, and this does annoy you, but it might also annoy you because internally, you do not like this trait about yourself, and have projected it onto them. To find our true self, according to Ewing, we have to be aware of our shadows and accept them along with our personas. In the tutorial section of Kingdom Hearts, Sora literally encounters his shadow, his dark side. What is Sora's unconscious telling him? Will he become conscious of his shadow? Kingdom Hearts is all about the balance of light and darkness. Ewing's theory of personality is quite similar in this regard. As we analyze more psychological elements in the series, let's continue to pay attention to Sora's behavior around his friends. How does he treat them? What do they do that annoys him? What mask does he seem to wear? It is hard to identify this early in the game, but as we play through, let's just make sure we're paying attention and taking notes as we go along. I think what's important is that we all start to identify what our shadow is, accepting it, embracing it, and then trying to make some of those changes if we really don't like the shadow that we have, and identifying that we do put on a face, we do put on a facade for others, I'm doing so even when making videos and playing video games with my friends. There is a little bit of a persona there. So it's just something that we should all be cognizant of and think about. And there's tons and tons of resources out there that you can seek out to help you with this. Just make sure that it's a .edu, .org, or a, page from a actual reputable source. Don't just go to Wikipedia. Don't just YouTube it, because unless the person is a professional, they might not know what they're talking about. Like me. I'm OCDsaster, and I want to thank you for watching. You are key.